Welcome back to Tea and Stuff. I'm here with my friend Linda Gaylard, who's from my favorite favorite place to go ever, Toronto. Haven't seen you in a long time. We've caught up a little bit here and there, obviously, but for obvious reasons, our countries have in the situation in the world has just sort of kept travel, even New York to Canada travel. It just either too risky or just not the right time or not allowing. But I was super excited to have you on here. For those of you who don't know Linda, she is an author. You're an author of this book, which is the Tea book. And so I was so embarrassed that I didn't already have this book when we started talking, because I was well aware of it. It was in my Amazon cart many times. Don't know how it didn't make it its way. Anywho, I think it was the last Toronto Tea Festival or one of the last ones. I was able to scoop this up from you. And one of the impressions I got right off the bat when I started going through it was the style that you have this in, how the graphics work with the text, work with the overall theme of the page. I was like, if I ever wrote a tea book, it would be like, this is how I would want it presented. Like, so not only are you an author, you're also a certified tea sommelier, correct?
Yeah.
So how did you obtain your certification? You don't have to necessarily do your whole tea story, but what got you to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's almost 12 years ago now, I enrolled in the tea sommelier program at George Brown College. So it was part of their culinary arts faculty. And they had had a wine sommelier program at the school for quite a long time. And a couple of teachers there, one of whom was a chef. I think they were both chefs, actually. One of them had studied through the Specialty Tea Association in New York City, done the courses. To get back to my do you want me to start at the beginning again, or do you want me
No. Just we'll pick back up with the
Okay.
certification.
So they decided to do it in conjunction with the Tea Association of Canada. At least the curriculum was put together by these two chefs who also were tea specialists. And they thought it would be cool to have a certification process similar to what they have with wine sommeliers. So they went through the Tea Association of Canada. That relationship is no longer. So, and I'm not even sure if George Brown College is still teaching the tea course because of, I don't know what's happening with the pandemic and so on. That may have changed. But there are online courses offered through the Tea Association of Canada now. I think the advantage of the course that I did was that there were many, many hours of classroom time with my, student cohorts. And that was really great to be with, 30 other people studying tea in depth. And, something like 250 hours of classroom time. So 8 units of courses and, maybe a month and a half per unit. And it was a continuing education course. So at the time I was working in kind of the fashion television world. And so I was able to take these courses at night. And once I graduated, took a year. And once I graduated, I just kind of launched right into tea right away. And I think the advantage for me and others of my cohort was that we got out of the gate early in terms of the third wave of tea anyway. The marketplace is very busy. I was going to say crowded and noisy, but I'll say very busy. There's a lot of people into tea. There's a lot of people starting up tea businesses. You can sort of tell who's going to last and who isn't. I decided I made a decision early on not to sell tea, not to be a retailer, but to continue in the vein of my studies, which was really to sell the idea of tea,
Yeah.
and the accessibility of tea to people. Um, Hence the book and quite a few courses that I've taught in person and lectures that I've presented at tea festivals, that sort of thing.
So is your knowledge base like pretty, not completely, but pretty based in your certification program? Or because like you have a really extensive knowledge, especially with the botany of the tea plant.
Yeah,
And did you have a history in that prior to tea?
no, no. Interesting. When I started the course again, it was probably 12 years ago. Um, there wasn't a lot of information coming out of Asia at the time. I think what's made a massive difference is, translation apps and that sort of thing. Like a lot of books written in Chinese were not accessible to us at all. And now you can basically just go through with your app and read the book. And there's so much more information. There are exchanges going on social media between growers and vendors and interested um, public, and interested tea lovers. So initially, there wasn't quite as much information available to me. So I think what I have done over the years is I've just gone off on these tangents and learned things. I mean, we did tea garden management, but it was somebody who had been a tea grower in India came into our class for a few sessions and taught us about, the rotor vein and commodity tea, and which is a useful thing to know about. Really, it is truly a useful thing to know about if you want to understand how the industry works or part of the industry works. And then, I would go to World Tea Expo every year and sit in and on many of the educational conference sessions and learn more. And I've been always, always interested in the plant. I think there's so much attention on the made leaves, and on, even certain farms and terroir and that sort of thing is important to the plant, but just this I don't know, miracle of this plant and what it can be, what it could have been, if it weren't plucked and pruned, but what it is and what it possibly will be in the future if we get into agroforestry and that sort of thing. So that is one of the tangents I've gone on. Another tangent um, I've moved to is tea and social history. That's really fascinating to me. So, the rituals that we have around tea and the customs and the culture and how it varies from country to country. And I really focus a lot on that in the book as well. So those are things that are interesting to me. There's a lot of little areas of tea study that we haven't explored yet, that are still open. And this is one of the things that got me into tea in the first place, is because the universe is huge and cosmic, and there's just so much to take in and to learn and
And
explore
tea,
and discover.
and tea itself, like literally, can open your eyes up like that. Like
Ah,
it's absolutely amazing. I always find the cultural part of it really interesting too, to have seen how many roles it's had. I mean, it's been a drink for people that were stopping drinking alcohol. It's been something to help calm. It's been something to help energize. It's been something to help center. It's been some. It's something to help to nourish and to help you keep going. So it's like you said, it's been so many places, and there's just an endless possibility of where it goes from here.
Mhm. Yeah. And, we can get a little bit stuck on correctness, the correctness of the ritual. And I think it's very important to learn and to respect how a ritual is meant to be practiced and delivered. But I think it's also important, once you know that and you've respected it, to then modify that to what works for you, whether that's leaving out a few steps or adding a step of your own or using different teaware. Um, like maybe using a non-traditional piece of teaware to make a tea from a completely different terroir. I think it's very important to be progressive about tea and to value and respect the rituals and the history, and then to make up new rituals that are personalized and accessible.
Yeah, that's something I actually really love about what I've seen just in the past couple of years of coming to visit Toronto. I've seen, obviously there's bubble tea shops everywhere, and I'm not dissing bubble tea shops. And I know you have no issue with tea drinks other than gong fu as well. But something I've seen that I've noticed over the couple of years is that even a lot of those bubble tea places are starting to offer a premium tea option. Like I think it's a good sign that you see some of these businesses are starting to re-recognize that maybe offering something from the roots isn't so out of place and isn't away from their business.
Right. That's an interesting direction to go in, because often what you see is more traditional tea rooms also offering a bubble tea option, you know. So it's nice to see it moving in the other direction as well. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem with bubble tea. To get back to the book, it was a collaboration with the publishers. So a lot of the beautiful layouts that you see in the book, and there's a big spread on bubble tea. Um, there, that was, I obviously didn't do the illustrations. There were really
Yeah.
very talented graphic designers and an artistic director for the layouts. There were photographers and food stylists and cartographers, and I was very, very fortunate to have all that talent at my fingertips. It was just
And I'm thank you for acknowledging them.
oh yeah.
Like that's that's so big. Like because the overall the compliment still, like, I am putting it to you, but it is so important to remember that like how many hardworking people
Oh
worked with you to put
yeah,
it
I
together.
mean, it would be different if it had been a self-published book.
Hmm.
You know, I would probably be quite happy to take most of the credit, but this was done through an established publishing house. It's a division of Penguin Random House. They're big publishers. Yes, they invited me to come on board, and they were beautiful collaborators. Like it was a
You can
lovely, lovely experience.
you can tell just in how well so many different people with so many different types of input on this book, how it all came together in one stylistic
Yeah,
vision. Like it really did all come together to form one solid
right.
piece.
Well, it's like with any project you take on, you have to start with a plan, right? So we started with the table of contents, and there weren't a lot of books available at that time. And it was published 6 years ago now, although there's an update in 2018. But when I was working on it in 2014, the books that I had as reference books were very dense and beautiful books. not for the novice. Like they were okay for me because I was already had an education in tea. And so then, but I thought, gee, when I started my course, there was no textbook or no comprehensive primer for a world of the art of tea. And that was really what I set out to do with the tea book and with the publisher. And because they were located in the UK, they said it's ridiculous that we've never published a book on tea. Big publisher like that had never. So I wrote the UK version, and then they had an American editor Americanize the book, which is the one that you have, and the one that I sell is the American version. But I mean, it's sort of like there might be a line like, you can find all these ingredients in your store cupboard. But the American version is, you can find all these ingredients in your pantry. And now when you visit the high street, you'll see many shops that sell tea. So when you visit the main street or you're downtown, it's sort of.
A lot of people from the Western world would kind of like, even though they're speaking English, they're speaking in unfamiliar contexts and sayings. So you're right. I never even thought about that how much adjustment would need to be had for that alone. What are you drinking, by the way?
I'm drinking some roasted dongbing from Tillerman from Taiwan. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I haven't sipped it yet, so I'm assuming it's beautiful. Yeah, I was gonna, I'm trying to use up a lot of, got a lot of tea samples, that were given to me to use however I like, to give them some feedback, that sort of thing, or for social media. And so now I've bought tea over the season as well, not very much because some suppliers have been, or at least some vendors have been having some supplier issues. I'm trying to, there are some teas that I think are so special, like some of the teas that you gave me. And I think, oh, I've got a tiny bit left, and I think, come on, Linda, just use these teas and enjoy them, and, use the nice teaware. And, why would I be saving them, particularly in this situation we're all in?
I was just having this conversation, I think yesterday. Somebody messaged me on Instagram, and they were talking about one of my Japanese white teas, and they were talking about what they were thinking about what they should do with the rest of the bag they had. And they were like, well, I only had about 2 sessions of it, so there's probably a couple sessions left, but I really want to see what it's like aged. So I think I'm going to age it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's not like, if that's really where your heart is, that curiosity is what your heart's looking for, then go for it. But if you're holding out on that, especially less than 100 or 50 grams, if you're dealing with a little bit of tea leaves in a bag, there's only so much they'll really even be able to age. I mean, without a lot of encouragement.
Yeah. So sometimes what I do, if it's just, if I'm tasting tea, and I worked for a vendor before the pandemic, he asked me to, it was a startup, but he was selling really good tea, all Chinese tea. And he sent me boxes and boxes of samples, and I asked for 15 grams of each because I knew that I would make it one day and I would think, I'm going to give this another go because I'm not satisfied with my infusion time or the water I used or whatever it was, so I had multiple opportunities to taste it and rate it. And then of course I had to write the web copy and that sort of thing. But what I found, sometimes I'm left, because this Gaiwan here, it's usually about 1.7 grams, whereas my bigger Gaiwans, it's about 2.5. Yeah. And then I have this other method. I wish I had the cups handy, but I have, there's those Chinese restaurant cups. They're really thick porcelain.
Hardy.
Little ones. Oh, I have about 60 of those because that I when I would do tastings for a group of 30 people or something, I had 60 of these things and I would take them along with me. So I have a lot of them. So, but what I would do, it's about this size. So I would put, like maybe 1 gram of the leaves in here and pour the water on and then put another one on top, another cup on top. And that way I got a pretty good representation of what that tea was optimally supposed to taste like. And then I had, maybe another 4 or 5 grams left in the bag that I could enjoy at my leisure. Right. So I sort of learned that trick. And I also have the sort of, I guess you call them the Indian tea taster sets, with the bowl and the little cup with the notched edge in the lid. Yeah. Those tea tasting sets. But I rarely use them.
I have 5 sets of them.
Yeah, that's what I have too.
And I use them when I'm doing a presentation somewhere.
Yeah.
I'll use it to so that I did a music festival this summer and I had I was selling some of the bagged up leaf, and so I had one of those with just some leaves in it that I had wet, and as people came around and were looking at the teas, I could like re-wet it or they could take it and get a better aromatic kind of profile of the tea itself. And then like I would have maybe some of the brewed leaves in the cup. So I'm not using them in any, the way they're supposed to be used. But I mean, I know a lot of people that do use them and get a lot out of them. It's a tasting was definitely, I know I'd mentioned that to you, is something that I wanted to talk about today. It's something that is probably most requested of just me. And when I was talking about just questions for people wanted answered with professionals that I was speaking with, and I thought that you being a certified tea sommelier, but also now, since diving far deep into the tea rabbit hole, I'm sure you've learned a few sort of tricks of your own. So I was curious as to if you have to go into tasting a tea, besides, like you said, making sure you have enough to have it maybe more than one time, what type of process or what tools do you like to use most?
Well, the thing is, your audience is probably made up mostly of people who know a lot about tea. I'm thinking. Mostly what I do is I teach people who hate green tea, for example. And so my goal, and I know that within a group of 6 people here in my studio doing a tea tasting, there are going to be 2 or 3 of those people who hate green tea. And I know why, because they've been putting boiling water on crap tea and leaving it for 3 minutes, right? It's probably just really, really, really bad tea bag green tea. And so that is one of the sort of highlights for me, is introducing these people to how exquisitely beautiful green tea can be. I start by showing the dry leaf and pointing out what is so good about this dry leaf. Then I will warm the gaiwan and I will put the dry leaf in the gaiwan, and I'll pass it around, and I just go like this, and they're already, hooked on the aromas. They just love that. And then, there have been occasions when I've gotten so involved in chatting with my guests.
You're okay. It'll come back.
Okay.
Sorry.
So involved with chatting with my guests that I will oversteep the green tea, but I always taste it myself. And then I'll just pour it into the boat or into the waste bowl and start again and just say, this is what happened. And this is what happens when you overseep. Sometimes I let them taste it, but usually not. And then I'll just start again and I'll say, this is why when you make green tea, you have to be really conscious. You have to be really mindful. But it doesn't take very long. It's only,
Right.
like I said, steep for increments of 30 seconds. Like you can dip a spoon in the gaiwan and taste and think, yeah, that's good. Especially if it's a green tea you're having for the first time, and either you don't know, you've never bought from that vendor before, or you've
Hmm.
never bought from that region. So you want to kind of just play with what is the best timing. Um, but then I'll pour it into the fairness jug and then pass it around in little tasting cups, tiny ones like that. And they really are hooked on it, and I have to give them some pages of information to take home with them because they won't remember what the
Yeah.
tea was. So when I started by saying I decided when I was launching my career that I wasn't going to be a tea vendor. But when I do these events, I'll make sure that the tea that I'm using is there for them. It might be in the same packaging as the, external vendor that I purchased from. But just
Hmm.
as long as they have some to take away with them, because often they want it, they don't know where to start, where they can buy it, how they can buy it, what they should be looking for. And this way, if they've got it, they can just, if they love it, they can just reorder it, and maybe try something new. So I find starting with green tea with people is it's a real eye-opening, revolutionary thing for them. Like it
Well,
expands their
green
mind.
tea is. I feel like green tea is very poorly represented. So, like, if you get a green tea bag, at least to me, like, say you just get what is it, Lipton green tea bag. I taste that, and I'm not opposed to the taste, but that doesn't taste like green tea to me. I mean, if you take the taste that has, and even the amount of profiles, and you compare it to a Long Jing or something like that, that's why I think a lot of people, it's so jarring for them that they're expecting this, what they are used to from the tea bag or from the bottled iced tea, and when they sip this, Gong Fu made Long Jing, that nuttiness hits them, and they're like, whoa, what was that? And
Yeah,
even if they don't dislike it because of how unexpected it was, sometimes it can cause confusion.
yeah. Now, those tasting sets you were talking about, I think they work pretty well for black teas. And if you're doing a flight of Darjeelings or a flight of Hongcha or something like that, I think they work pretty nicely. I find them a little difficult to work with for greens and light oolongs. Um,
The-
and the other tea that I like to use when I did a couple of pop-ups where it was really, really fun to do because, like I say, I'm
Mhm.
not a vendor, but in this case, I was. It was at my local farmers market, and they decided to have a makers market as part of it. And so I inquired, and they said, "Yeah, I think you're a good fit." And I was selling cups and saucers and vintage aprons, from the 50s, and tea. And I was looking at your setup on Instagram the other day. You were at a market, weren't you,
Yep.
recently?
Yep.
Yeah, and it just reminded me what I did. Big vats of hot water, and I found one of the teas that really, really did well when I was doing these pop-ups was Bamudan, white peony,
Oh
because
yeah.
it is so forgiving. And I like to use it when I do tasting events as well. Um, it is very, there are some similarities to the green, but people actually, if you do the white right after you do the green, or vice versa, people really do see that they are quite a different entity. But I can slightly oversteep it, or the water. I could use even boiling water on a Bimudan, and like I still get a good result. It might be different from
Right.
using an 85-degree water, but it's still, Celsius, but it's still still a good tea. Like I think it's really hard to wreck a Bamudan. So that's
Yep.
another one I like to introduce to people.
The event I just did, I purposely picked the three teas that I knew I could alter the temperature if I had time, but I knew if I just needed to make tea real quick to serve to people and I
Yeah.
used the boiling, that they'd be okay. I made
Yeah.
sure that they were all sturdy enough to handle
Right.
that.
That's right. That's what you need when you're outdoors and there's a lot of variables, and you might get carried away in conversation with, some of
Yeah.
the, visitors. And you want to be sure that whatever you present to them is still, you know, up to scratch, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
that's
you
good. That's good to select based on that.
and you were even mentioning earlier that a lot of the time when people get started, they're not using great leaf, and that's obviously a big red
Yeah.
flag. Um, but it's also sometimes you can have a good quality leaf, but like maybe you don't know enough about how you like a certain tea type to know how you should steep it to your perfect taste. So you steep it with what the vendor suggested, and sometimes that's not. Even though it's a good tea, you may not like it steeped that way.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That a lot of the vendor packaging suggests, 2 or 3 minutes for green tea. And I always think, no, you don't want to do that, and I don't know whether it's just like a copy issue, where they're looking at their copy and they want to keep things consistent and not change things around too much from bag to bag. I like packaging where the vendor actually writes, there's the symbol, and then they write in how much they recommend, so that it's not kind of a boilerplate thing.
Yeah, that was really hard when I was just making labels just to figure out how to present the steeping information, like how to make it not too overwhelming, but to provide the information that you would need to be guided into
Yeah,
steeping a tea.
yeah. And then to let people know that they can have um, multiple steeps as well. That's something that people who are new to tea um, are quite surprised to hear. They think they look at a package of tea being $18 and for 50 grams or something, and they think, well, geez, and then they'll fill up their big teapot with like 3 tablespoons of tea, and I'm thinking, well, geez, that's almost half the bag gone right there. And I always tell them, and this is the other thing when I was doing these pop-ups, and when I've had a table at tea festivals, I've often had gaiwans for sale as well, because I just feel it is the best vessel for um, pure enjoyment of tea. If you
I use
want
a
to,
plain I use just a plain white gaiwan for all my in-depth tastings, like when I really need to focus and taste a tea. I use a plain white porcelain gaiwan.
yeah,
I like it better than all the fancier different clay vessels I have, and it provides such a beautiful blank slate
I
for the tea.
yeah, I agree. I do like the glass one for if I've got a leaf that I think is particularly beautiful, then I like to use the glass so that I can, watch it unfurl, or, watch these tiny little sort of sparrow tongue, just kind of turn into these little delicate little buds. So that's kind of fun. Sometimes I like to do that, but I'm with you. Most of my gaiwans are porcelain, at least the interior is plain white. Sometimes the outside is, a little more decorative, but that's
Yeah.
what I was selling, was those just plain white. I think they were maybe like 4.5 ounces, something like that, or I don't know what that would be. And I switched from ounces to milliliters, and centigrade to not too often Fahrenheit, but I try to keep it consistent. But with the gaiwans, I measure those in ounces, and
Hmm.
then with the weight of the tea, it's in grams. I don't understand
That's
why I do that, but
I mean, I'm in the land of Fahrenheit and I don't even know it. I've been doing tea so long and measuring in grams, milliliters. I don't even remember. I have to like actually like Google back if I have to change something back into Fahrenheit. Like I've been working with Celsius for so long that
wow, yeah.
I I don't have the grasp I used to have on it.
Yeah, it seems as though the tea world is in Celsius, isn't it? Like all the temperatures pretty. I've been noticing that more and more, even retailers from the States quoting in Celsius rather than in Fahrenheit. Um, and maybe that's partly because that's what they do in Europe. Do they do that in Asia? Is it in Celsius in Asia?
I believe
I think
so.
so. Maybe that's why, because it's sort of the temperature language of tea.
Well,
No,
that's was you know, like I said, it was really hard make just making labels alone for a tea because you're just sitting there with like, well, do I go with how the world does it, or do I do it with just how the U.S. does it? Because I'm in the
right.
U.S., but I'm doing something that's very worldly. So then I shouldn't be focusing on local; it should be global. And I did decide that I just saw out of how much I looked into it, how many places were using the milliliters and Celsius, that seemed to be the most common thread
Yeah.
between the countries that were big in tea. So that's what I sat with. And sometimes people are frustrated by it. And another way I put it is for the Celsius, it's, you know, zero's freezing, 100's boiling.
Yeah.
Like
That's so
that's
easy to remember.
if I had been taught that in elementary school, I would have caught on way quicker
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
temperatures.
You know what, when you remember when Houston had that cold spell and the weather network was telling us in Canada what the temperatures were they were in Fahrenheit. And I was thinking, well, zero, like that's not so cold. I mean, if our house went down to zero, I could probably handle that, just put on a few extra sweaters. And yes, it's close to freezing, but are these people wimpy or what is it? And then I realized, oh no, that's Fahrenheit. That's like, I don't know, minus 25 Celsius or something. And that's really, really cold.
My oldest friend, the best man from my wedding, he grew up with me here in upstate New York, so very used to the snow. Used to, you know, we don't fear snow here. We have the equipment to take care of it. He's been living in Austin, Texas for a while now, and his mother and father just made the move out to be closer to them. The year they move out, right after they move in, the snowstorm happened.
Oh,
It's I mean, imagine that, like
and
getting on that plane and saying no more winters for us, and
yeah,
then
that
having that
is
happen.
just was such a freaky thing, really, that happened. Yeah, hopefully won't happen too much again, but hard to say. And that's another thing that we look at in terms of the future of the plant. The plant is designed to be grown, indigenously. It grew in the foothills of the Himalayas. So cooler temperatures, yes, but also within about 30 degrees north and south of the equator. So it's fairly temperate. It's not meant to get permafrost or the kind of frost that you might get in upstate New York or we get in southern Ontario or all over Canada for that matter, where, like that's why we can't grow tea here, right? Unless it's in a greenhouse. But um, so, we have to bear in mind. I just saw a post today from on Instagram from Gopaldara Estate, and they are suffering from severe flooding, and which washed out. He posted pictures, and you could see some of the soil has completely washed away. The bush is still
Oh,
standing, and its roots are still intact, but because the bushes are spaced out a bit, but some of the soil has washed away. And I guess it's the bushes, the plants that are probably keeping, the soil from further erosion from
and
the
how do you
floods.
how do you I mean, geez, how do you even would you try to like take soil and replant it up, or would you just let the erosion
Well,
happen? And
they said they were taking the day off work today to assess the damage, and that really too dangerous for the pickers because there are these big cavities in the soil. I mean, they only go down maybe 4 feet or something, but it would be easy to slip and fall in the kind of wet, muddy-ish soil. So I'm sure like they have an autumn pick coming up very soon in the next couple of weeks. So I think they're hoping the monsoon season's over, and I think they're hoping now that this last bit of rain was just a fluke and that they can get into their bushes. I don't know if they'll infill. I don't know. I really don't know if that would be something you want to do until you know for sure you're into your dry season,
right.
because it could still be a bit wet. It could still wash away a bit.
But
Um,
that's got to affect the garden though. I mean,
yeah,
because the one, I mean, there it could the ones at the top are could be it could be just it could be because of the erosion you could get just rock heavy soil and not as many nutrients, and then the nutrients sort of run down, which is good for the down plants, but
good point.
not good.
Yeah,
There's yeah, the globe, that's watching, obviously I've been watching global warming happen for years now, and just, well, it's just weather change over the years. But now being so into tea and knowing how fragile the environment is and how much the tea plant needs a right amount of nutrients, it needs the right amount of water, it needs certain
it
things to really do
it
what it needs
needs
to do.
some sunshine and it needs mist and cloud cover. Yeah, it needs nutrients in the soil, and good point that some of those nutrients might have been washed away. It's really difficult to say how deep the rain penetrated the soil, but it certainly lifted up some of the soil. Obviously, the soil between the bushes would be looser than, like, the roots are so incredibly strong on a tea plant that they probably held that those bits of soil together, and maybe it's hard to say if nutrients were leached from the soil or not, but it's an interesting thing to watch. I also just saw a post from Nigel Melican yesterday on Facebook about a new type of tea plucker. It's a what is the word that they use? It's kind of a very discretionary tea plucker. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but it can identify 2 leaves in a bud and 1 leaf in a bud. It
Oh,
doesn't pick the time, actually, it doesn't pick 1 leaf in a bud and the bud. It leaves them to grow more. So, not all gardens would want to use it because some continue to use hand plucking.
right.
But this is great for those gardens that are losing labor to the cities, particularly in North India, West Bengal, and places like that. So it's, I think, a very exciting development in terms of technology. But it has these gears, these rollers that can detect, it's more mechanical than you might think. It can detect the size of the shoot, and it does not pick any of the mature leaves. It only picks 2 leaves in a bud or 3 leaves in a bud.
Is it computerized? Does it have or is it purely mechanical?
Um, Nigel posted it in the US tea growers group on Facebook. So you could go, there is a link to a Dropbox video that he posted. So you could have a look at the video. There's a lot of animation in the video that makes it very, very clear, but it looks to me, I am sure there has to be some, computer aspect to it.
Hmm.
Uh, it could just simply be timing, or I don't know that there's a camera in it. That's
Yeah, I guess that's what I was trying to.
well, there have been some things that almost replicate. a hand, like a robotic hand that has cameras in it, that is plucking, just the fine buds and the two leaves in a bud. But you still need somebody to operate those, where as this machine can roll over a whole row of plants that, are the plucking table just rolls over in the spring as the new growth comes up, identifies the new growth, doesn't pick the older growth. And then they wait a couple of weeks and it comes back and does the same thing with the next bit of new growth. So I think it's made by a company called Williams with an E. I think it's going to revolutionize tea plucking. I guess it remains to be seen how successful it is at contributing to the production of a very fine specialty tea.
It'd be nice if some of those pickers also weren't, I don't want to say wasting time, but aren't out in a giant commercial field just moving as fast as they can, just trying to get as much as they can done in the day. Like, let the machine do that kind of work. Like, I mean, I would hope that maybe this would give some pickers who have passion, real passion in what they do, it would allow them to do it without a big boss over their shoulder type deal.
What it might mean, or there could be, I mean, there's so many implications from this, but what could possibly happen is a portion of the gardens would be reserved for hand plucking, but only hand plucking the tip, bud, and one leaf in a bud. So the really, really fine pluck for the early harvest teas would still be done by hand. But the plucks for, say, some of the hongchas that they make from early buds, not really early, not pre-Ming Ching, obviously, but the earlier buds, and maybe even, I don't know, I think they probably wouldn't want to use that machine for plucking any of the oolongs, so I don't know it's hard to say what they're going to use it for, but I think it's just in its infancy. It's new. I think this company has been making tea plucking machines for quite a long time, but this is a very specialty area. And so, for instance, the US grown tea, it would be prohibitively expensive to hire pickers.
Oh, yeah.
The tea would be, you'd end up paying $35 for, 50 grams of tea or something like that. So, maybe that's what it is anyway. I don't know.
Well, that's Hawaiian tea. That's pretty much that's how it is there. Pretty. Yeah. But I don't know if you've had Hawaiian tea. I haven't had a ton, but I was offered a very special production white, and it was pretty impressive for being Hawaiian.
I had it. There were Hawaiian vendors at World Tea Expo maybe 10 years ago. And when they were just introducing their teas. And so there was a whole sort of group from Hawaii who were there. And there were some lovely teas that I tasted. They also they brought branches of their tea bushes because they could, because even though we're coming from the middle of the Pacific, it was still the US and there were no customs hassles with bringing it into World Tea Expo. So I got to see, probably back then for the very first time, what an actual tea leaf looked like. And the Hawaiian tea leaves are quite large. The ones that they were using anyway. I don't know if they were a hybrid of Sinensis and Assamica, but they seem to be much, much larger than Sinensis.
Oh, yeah.
Not really sure, but of course, very interesting terroir in Hawaii too, with all the volcanic soil and
yeah. I was also we were talking about machines. A lot of people obviously hear machine picking, machine rolling, and immediately it's like, ugh, it'll never be handmade. And I think that's correct because the intention isn't. Machines don't really have intentions yet. but I forgot where I was going with that. Shoot.
Well, I could step in and finish the sentence in a maybe slightly different direction you were going, but close, in that if you get tea pluckers who are in a bad mood on a bad day, in bad weather or whatever the reason is, they feel, they don't feel satisfied with, or don't love their job, or they're having problems at home or something, you're going to get an ugly pluck, like it can actually affect the the result of the tea. Or they might just be sloppy. They might just be picking in a sloppy way, and more getting a tear at the bottom of the stem, and who knows. Whereas a machine only knows one way to do it. It's no
I will
emotion comes to play.
I will say though, in the last couple years, I've seen some ball rolled oolongs that were fully rolled mechanically. I don't I feel like they're getting better with those machines, or maybe how to utilize them, because
Yeah.
I've seen a couple machine rolled teas that I could have mistaken as hand.
Well, I'm not sure that there's a lot of hand rolling going on anyway in
It's
with
very
the
select.
onion and the other oolongs, because most factories have rolling machines now, and they might start out with a cloth bag for the
Yep.
initial bit of bruising and rolling that they do, but I think it gets finished because I remember seeing again at World Tea Expo a demonstration by Thomas Shu from Taiwan, and he used to bring in the most interesting people, and he brought in this young guy who knew how to hand roll oolongs. And he had this bench that he sat astride, and he had this big cotton sack that was full of oolong leaves. And he had like a broomstick, a big wooden stick
Hmm.
that he twisted until he got the tightest he could get. And you could just see the juices coming out of the leaves as he was rolling it. And he did this maybe 3 or 4 times in front of us as part of his presentation. And he opened the cloth between rollings and showed us how it was progressing. And Thomas said, in actual fact, he said, like, traditionally they would do this about 35 times in order to get the tight roll that they wanted. And nobody is going to spend that they might do the first 4 maybe in a cloth bag. I really don't know.
Right.
It looks good to have a video posted on your site if you're selling oolongs, to show them doing the cloth thing, but it is just not practical to to
Yeah.
to actually produce right to the full making of that oolong all the way through, to do 35 you know rollings like that.
Our jade oolong, our Yushan, is it does have, obviously you said very partial, but it does have partial hand rolling. And I'll tell you, I really appreciate it. I really see the benefit. I'm okay with paying a higher price for something that more work would into, but the mass people don't necessarily feel the same. So in an overall production definition, I 100% understand why they don't.
And there will always be a market for handmade teas. I mean, we will always be the the market for those
Hmm.
handmade teas. And I love a tea that has a story. um, I'd like to know the steps. I like to know that maybe they added this extra step, or maybe they skipped this step because they found with their tea it wasn't necessary, and they got a better flavor if they skip that step, or what have you. But I do like. Oh, when I was in China, for instance, visited a jasmine factory.
Ooh, that's
I think
interesting.
I might have mentioned this, and I don't know whether you were at Sucha Tea's chat between friends. She and I chatted a few weeks ago, but it was interesting because I didn't like jasmine tea. I just thought it was,
Oh.
like the peasant's oolong. If you couldn't afford oolong, you got jasmine. And then there were all these stories about how jasmine tea was really produced because the water in Beijing is so horrible tasting that
Oh,
if you made jasmine tea with the water, it would taste good. You know, the jasmine would take over the taste of the bad water. So I thought these are not good associations to have with this
no.
tea. But I walked into this factory, which is probably 200 or 300 years old. Gorgeous, gorgeous old wood factory. I've written about this on my site actually, and it was the aromas, the fragrance of jasmine. They just brought baskets of the jasmine buds into the factory, and it was around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And there was a film crew there that was making a film for the Chinese television. And there was, and we were with the Minister of Agriculture for Fujian province. And that's where most jasmine is made or is grown in Fujian. So it was really interesting. I got a lot of good information from that visit. And jasmine flowers don't open in the day, they open at night, or the buds open at night. They'll stay open during the day, but they open at night. And it was August and it was swelteringly hot. And these buds just were opening, and the fragrance was my clothes smelled of jasmine afterwards. It was pretty
Oh,
gorgeous. And the light was dim, like there were all these sort of incandescent lights around. And um, the maker, Master Lao Fu, I think his name was, had me trying to sift the jasmine buds through this sifter. So it sifts out the buds that aren't going to open. So after the baskets have been sitting for a while, if the flowers are going to open, the buds are going to open, they will have opened by then. And anything that hasn't opened isn't useful. So they sift those out, and you have to sort of do it in an angle. And it was quite tricky to do. And then they they bring out all previously made green tea that they made during the spring. And it's all completely made and dried, and it's in these big sacks. And they layer a layer of green tea, a layer of jasmine flowers, a layer of green tea, a layer of jasmine flowers. They let that sit for a few minutes, and then they mix it all together. And then they go sleep for a couple of hours. And then they come back, and there are people there who pick out the flowers by hand. They pick the flowers out by hand, and then the unopened buds the workers are allowed to take the unopened buds with them, and they will dry them and sell them at a market as like a drawer freshener, or like a um,
potpourri or
yes,
something.
potpourri type thing. Yeah. So then after they've separated out all the flowers, they will then um, heat up the leaves and dry them again and bag them again. And they'll do this over 5 nights until they have a very fragrant jasmine tea. And I brought some back with me. And even though I didn't like jasmine tea, I will pull it out every now and then. And just it reminds me of that experience. So these teas do have a story. And the closer you can get to knowing what that story is as a retailer, a vendor, or a teacher, the better the experience is going to be for your guests and your customers. I'm sure
Oh,
they would
I can't wait. I can't wait for my customers to hear that. A lot of that you just told me was a lot of that was new information for me. And we have our jasmine. We have a Fujian jasmine black tea, um,
Oh yeah.
and it's crazy because a lot of people look at it and, like you said, they're like, I've tried jasmine tea. I'm not much of a floral person, but there it's the skill of it's just like anything else in tea. It's the skill of the person doing it. It's the quality of the ingredients in it. But jasmine tea, I just like any tea, I firmly believe if it's produced well, produced with intention, and somebody knowledgeable makes it for you, it should be pretty enjoyable. Might not be your favorite, but
Right. I agree. And a lot of people associate it with restaurant tea, like it's just, jasmine, no thanks. But if you want to take a look at the article that I wrote on my website, it does go into a bit more details. So what you don't remember from what I said today, you can go back and reference. There's more information as well.
I'll try to get the links from you, and I'll be able to just include those in the description because I definitely want to read more. Oop.
It was that those types of experience to, I mean, the experience itself, going to a country of origin, and I'm really, really. Is it okay now?
Yes, yes,
All
yes.
right, it
Yep.
just stopped for a moment there. I'm really overdue a trip to Asia, and my next place I will visit will be Japan. Definitely. I mean, there's a lot about Japanese tea that I do not understand. I mean, I'm very fortunate in that a friend of mine and one of my colleagues from the tea sommelier program, who has now, you might have met Mo.
Oh, of course.
Momo
Yes. Oh, I know
Yoshida.
Momo.
Yeah. Uh, she has shared a lot of really wonderful Japanese teas with me through workshops that she's done and visiting her when we were able to get together. And so she can get things from growers in Japan that usually never get out of Japan because there's such a big domestic market. We really only see 1% of the tea that's grown in Japan. And to also just the Japanese design aesthetic is really um, very attractive to me. And I would like to learn more about that, learn more about, fabrics. And I think they embrace the sensory experience of tea, probably maybe even more than most tea cultures. And so all those senses involved with tea appreciation in Japan, I want to explore further. I try to incorporate a lot of sensual experiences when I do tea tastings because I feel it's not entirely about taste.
Right.
It's about the visuals. It's about hearing the water pouring on the leaves. It's about hearing the leaves kind of crackling as the water hits them. Sounds a little bit like
Mm-hmm.
taffeta. It's also about the mouthfeel. It's about the temperature. It is about that sense, and it's also about feeling the leaf afterwards with your fingers. Like I mean, there's just so much involved that I think people are missing out if they only concentrate on taste and aroma. I think music can play a huge part in your enjoyment of tea as well. Although it can be, I know of people who do tea tastings where they have no art on the wall, their tea table faces
Yep.
a blank wall, they use blank equipment, like our white Gaiwans. And I think that is good. I think that's a good way, especially when you're studying tea. That's a good way to remove anything that might distract you from understanding what that tea is. But I think once you have the understanding, have fun with it, like bring other elements of sensation into the experience.
It's the thing I respect most about Japan, but also I think it's one of its biggest hindrances is that it is so structured and so spiritual that everything has been produced a certain way for a reason. But I feel that they pay very well homage, but I feel they have a really hard time uh, experimenting, such as like the Japanese white teas. There are obviously a couple obvious reasons as to why you wouldn't want to produce a white tea, but if I was a farmer and let's say I was looking to switch things up a little bit or just make a special production, I just don't understand why more of that tea isn't seen outside. I know it's being made in Japan, but like, why am I one of the only few stores that has a Japanese white every year? Like, that boggles my mind.
Yeah. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a like a Japanese aged tea, like a pu'er, until I went to World Tea Expo about 7 years ago. There was a vendor who had it. Um, so yeah, it does. I mean, I know that the whole Japanese tea scene is like there's the youth scene where it's, do whatever you want to do with matcha and have fun with it. And then there's the traditionalists, and it's very prescriptive. Everything has to be done according, and maybe there's different schools, but everything has to be done in this way, in this order. Um, and you never reach enlightenment. There's always this struggle to reach enlightenment. And I understand that. It's a part of Japanese spirituality, really. Like, and I think though, this friend of mine, Momo, friend of
Hmm.
ours,
Yeah.
she did a workshop last year that I participated in as a participant, as a guest. And we had to buy the teas in advance. And there was something called dango cha, which was it's a byproduct after the steaming of the tea, after the steaming of gyokuro. So it's where chunks of tea stick together. It happens with shopur as well. It can happen that there are chunks and people
Little
will
clumps.
remove those clumps and kind of make a story around them and sell them for a bit more, because of, and these look like, apparently there's I think a candy that's shaped like a worm, and these sort of look like little worms. I'm sorry I didn't have them out. They're in a cupboard right now, so
You're fine.
I have to turn my back on you to get them. But really interesting, and apparently you make them. I mean, um, I've been infusing them cold, infusing them at lukewarm temperature, but you don't infuse them at hot temperatures. So, and you can watch them. You can even infuse them in ice. You just sort of
Yeah.
watch them fall apart, and it's gyokuro. So, what's not to like? They are just a deep, deep forest green color, and there are these little bars. She was going to try to get more, but she said they're kind of rare. So, it's a little hard to find them. I think the reason we don't see a lot of this in North America is that it isn't possible for Japan to produce enough tea to satisfy itself domestically and have enough export material. So we're getting the stuff that they don't want. Whereas if you're buying through a Japanese vendor who already has connections, or like you've been to Japan, I'm
No,
guessing.
no, no. But uh, uh, I do have the
Connection.
relationship.
Yeah.
I have a very close. My producer didn't make white tea, but I knew that he was very talented, and inventive. So every year I'd sort of go, "Hey, if you feel like experimenting," and then one year he just sent me a box. It just was on my doorstep. I opened it
Wow.
up, and it was a test batch. And so this is how Benefuki White came to be. So I tasted that, and I had never heard of even a Japanese white tea, so I had no idea what to expect. I liked the flavor. I could tell there was something there, but the texture was too rough.
Mm.
So I said to him, "Okay, so
The mouth,
next year,
the mouth feel
yes."
rough. Yeah.
And you can tell too much was extracted in the soup. There was too much catechins and stuff like that. So I said, "Hey, can you try? I'll pay more. That's fine. More full leaf."
Oh, yeah,
And so the
not broken
next
up as much. Yeah. How
next
about
year, so
bud?
then
Did he include any bud in it as well?
yep.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a oolong picking. It's a baimu. It's like a baimudan,
Yeah, of course.
like the picking style, but just that improvement on the whole leaf made the tea completely make sense. And so each year the producer makes these teas just for me because, like you were actually just saying, he couldn't make enough to put it on a huge market, and it would be sold out like that. And it's a lot of work as is. So he just does it because of our relationship, and because I tugged on his shoulder enough to sort of say, "Hey, I really think you could make something beautiful here." But the funny and the end note I'll say on that is that the producer hates it. Producer hates it. It
It
doesn't.
really has no umami at all.
No,
None,
no. It's
none
sweet. It's
whatsoever.
sweet. It's smooth. It doesn't have a punch of umami, and yeah. So he sort of every year he's sort of like, I mean, I'll make it, but you know, I can't understand why you and your people like it so much. And it's a for some people it's because it's something rare, but other people it's a very enjoyable white tea.
Yeah, it's a lovely white tea, but if he doesn't like it himself, he's relying on your feedback, right? So, how are you feeling about the most recent batch you got?
The best.
Yeah,
Every
really.
year this producer improves, and it's I not just with him. I give constructive criticism, kind constructive criticism to all my producers, to every tea I drink of theirs. If I think it's better, if I think it's worse, I really do. I think it's important for me to talk that over with them because sometimes it's something I'm missing, and sometimes for them it's they see an adjustment they didn't realize they had to do before.
Yeah. So this guy has taken in your suggestions for improvements, and it does keep getting better. And how
And
many years has he been doing it now?
five, I think.
Wow.
And
That's great. That's a wow, what a wonderful story.
I was surprised these last 2 years he made me a micro batch of each a special cultivar. He did last year was Kaoshun white, and then this year was Yume Wakaba white,
Mm.
and that one that's Yume Wakaba's got to be my favorite. Um,
And
it can
how does it differ from the Benefuki?
it's much thicker.
Mm.
I think a thicker body. It's got a like a warm wool type essence to it. It's almost there's parts of it that almost taste aged. Like it's got these really beautiful weathered
Wow.
accents to it, and it steeps over and over, and it never loses
So
its
that's
best
the
on it.
one, that's the keeper then. That's the one you'd like to go with sort of permanently, probably, eh? If you're going to carry one Japanese white tea, or do you
If I
like to have
had,
more than one to do some comparisons?
I would love it, but I leave it up to the producer each year. It's how much he makes, what he makes,
Oh,
that's up to him. I give him my feedback, and I buy what he makes. Um, I'm extremely lucky in that he's a very talented producer,
yeah.
and it's not like one of them has been a failure. I mean, since we established about how the picking and what the leaf material should look like in the end, all of them have been really phenomenal, and it's really incredible when I step back as a third person and look at it. Is I haven't been to the country, I don't speak the language. Um, this is something that they don't do. They're very specific about what teas they make and don't make and put to the market, and the fact that this guy from upstate New York who just has a huge passion for tea was able to through connections meet this producer and just through my influence uh, something really beautiful was made. And like I always joke, but I call Benefuki my baby just because I'm immensely proud of it. I mean, the producer is the one that made it, but the fact that to at least on the level of that producer, it wouldn't exist if I the interest hadn't been planted.
Right. And who's to say you won't be able to do that in other circumstances and situations as well with other growers? So that speaks very much to your ability to connect with them,
And you
and
mentioned
then they would have respect for you based on your knowledge and to your ability to give them feedback. That is something I think growers really appreciate. They're a little hesitant to accept feedback from Westerners, because
which
what do we know about tea, really?
to
But
a degree I get it.
I think once they realize that we have made a big investment in learning and have a commitment to it, I think they very quickly have respect. So that's a lot of it is gaining the respect, isn't it?
And that was you mentioned Momo. With coronavirus, shipping shut down from Japan to the U.S. very early, and they were not going to be reversing that. So I had no way to get my. I had the white tea made in what was that 2020, but I couldn't get it here. So one day I thought maybe I could bank it. So I messaged Momo, and I was like, "Hey, you think I could get a package shipped to you and you could forward it to me?"
Yeah.
And she was, when I explained what it was and why I was needing to do it, she was overjoyed
Yeah.
to just be like, "Oh, I no problem. You just tell me what you need."
She's really quite a remarkable person. So completely open and full of joy and willingness and sharing. And yeah, I really love Momo. That's wonderful that she was able to do that for you. I know she was having trouble getting goods. She said something that would normally take 3 days was taking 3 months to get to
And
her.
the price I was being quoted from FedEx was the only one that was shipping out, FedEx and DHL at that time.
Yeah.
The quote for, I think the total was 5 to 6 kilograms of the white tea. The lowest price I could find was $1,000,
Yikes.
and I couldn't put that tea at a high enough price point and sell every single gram. I still probably wouldn't have been able to pay off that site. So it was I had to just
That
have it
was the
sit there.
cost with the shipping of the tea, or was that just
No,
the
that was
cost of the
just the
shipping?
shipping.
Oh.
That was just the shipping charge. Yeah,
You
not even
you
the
ever
tea.
get surprises where you get an invoice in the mail weeks later from one of the shippers saying, here are all the extra brokerage things that we did for you, and now you owe us $100. Have you ever gotten that?
Wow, I've not
I got
gotten that
one
yet.
from UPS the other day for a gift that was sent to us, and it's due to be it's more the handling costs are more than the value of the goods that were the gifts that was sent. So it's neither here nor there. I've got somebody looking into it, but I just wondered if that I knew of other vendors that happened to here in Canada.
Oof,
Um,
that's a new one. I'm gonna have to
yeah,
look out for that.
yeah. Well, hey, if you
I,
haven't had that problem, because there is no tax on tea, pretty much globally, probably thanks to American history
mm-hmm.
and a few other things. It is considered a necessary food item, right?
Now,
So
little to people like you and me, it's slightly more than a food item,
yeah. But
but
to the
we
to
we
the
appreciate it
officials,
obviously.
yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm gonna need to get going.
Mm.
I I am absolutely so glad to have been able to sit down with you. So glad that I think we covered some really awesome topics that people are really going to enjoy. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way, or what's your preferred way to be
Um,
contacted?
you can post my email address. That's perfectly fine. Or it's sometimes just quicker for people to DM me through Instagram at the Tea Stylist. Yeah,
Beautiful.
that's an easy way to do it.
And I'll reach out to you hopefully, and I'll be able to get those links for those articles and videos and stuff. And if anybody has any other questions, they can reach out to you or me or comment in the video and all that. But otherwise, please continue to stay safe. Please stay healthy and sane.
Mhm.
And I'm sure it's only a matter of time before we'll be able to be in each other's graces again and have some
Yeah, at
good
the
day.
Toronto Tea Festival. Yeah,
It's
won't that be nice, Jeff? Won't that be wonderful? Yeah,
it'll be a very joyous, which is the perfect word, occasion. It'll be very
yeah,
joyous.
yeah.
So cheers to you. I really
Yes,
thank you again.
yes. Thank you. Cheers.